collaboration, but sometimes we have a collaboration that's kind of, we are going top-down. And our next speaker, Oleg Naumenko, he's an independent consultant who is a person who's doing this kind of project that he was coming. Maybe sometimes we would think parachuting somewhere, but his lessons are maybe simplistic, maybe well, for sure simple, maybe for some simplistic, but we believe that because projects are really hard, it's worth repeating the lessons to the moment when we stop making the mistakes. Oleg, please, the stage is yours.
All right. Good day, everyone, and thank you for still being with us and not falling asleep during the second day of the conference, although I realize that there is a lot of different information, a lot of the stuff that you probably heard about before, but I'm trying to keep it short, keep it a bit colorful to compensate for my dullness in real life, and also to talk about the issues that are, I would say, one of the most important to ensure the success of any international project that includes a lot of the members of the team, a lot of the different activities, but also a lot of money that are being given by the international donor organizations. And we sometimes tend to forget that these are the money that, well, should work first, but also demonstrate that they are effective and impactful. So I hope that by the end of my short spiel, you will get out of this room with some of the 3 key ideas in mind. Why, first, collaboration really matters, how to make sure that it's not just good collaboration, but also smart, and also what are some of the ways of going around with collaborating with your teams to ensure the success of your project. And just a bit about myself. I'm Oleg, I come from Ukraine, and I had an experience of working both in public and private sectors. With the public, it was mostly the military, not the most open people in the world, right? And not the most keen to work with the others. While in the private sector, a lot of the projects that I was part of were funded by the international donor organizations from the United States and the United Kingdom. So probably I'll just start from a very simple story that, you know, when you're planning your weekend and you want to meet up with your friends, there is always a question, okay, where shall we go? Should we go to the cinema? Should we be classy and go to the theater, or just go to the coffee shop? So there are lots of ideas, and usually quite a lot of time is being spent just about discussing, okay, let's go to this new hipster bar or some of the cafe. Same stuff works with any project that at least I have been part of. And usually the bigger, the more ambitious project is, the larger problems are about lacking of collaboration that may lead to just slow work, that you may spend a lot of time just discussing the issue, to weak results if your work is not being coordinated properly, and new conflicts that we all know, especially in the NGO environment, but also in the government sector and among different people in the private sector. Competition may not always lead to the bright idea, but also to some of the conflicts, and especially this is the case while you're implementing the project and the donor, let's say, and the audience that you are trying to help may have different ideas about what do they need. So how do we go about this, and also why this really matters? I'd say at first, collaboration and making sure that your project actually is effective is something that the donors simply want to have as a result of the increased scrutiny of their funds. So does this money are being spent wisely and in the most effective manner? Because they should report to their public, to the citizens of the wealthy states and developed states. But also, is the solution that you're proposing is innovative enough? Has it been not tried before? Is not just, you know, reinventing the wheel over and over again without really bringing tangible success. But also, what happens after the project? So if you implement your stuff and you develop a service, an idea, a product, is it going to survive once the funding is being terminated? So the questions of sustainability and how valuable this is for the audience that you are trying to help. I would say that it's going beyond that, and that good collaboration is an ethical issue that is really about how do we make sure that whatever we do doesn't do harm, helps other initiatives that are taking place already. We don't operate in the vacuum, but also, are we sure that whatever we are suggesting is not taking and dragging the resources from some other areas that may need these funds even more than the areas that we do. Let's say we are talking about disinformation about the quality of the media, and now this is this hot issue that a lot of donors go for, and they would fund various NGOs and the media development projects, but that happens sometimes at the expense of the other issues that may be no less relevant and no less important than quality delivery of news. So moving ahead, I'd say that good collaboration is good. Pardon my repeating of the word, but smart is even better. And by smart, I mean really that we operate in a large network of various NGOs and organizations that try to solve some of the big issues: disinformation, fake news, trust, who we can trust, and how to ensure that our work helps to build this trust with the local audiences. So instead of just suggesting the idea because you feel like it, maybe there are someone else who you can team up with and ensure that your work could be more specialized and more tailored to the needs of a particular audience. I would say, and that's not rocket science, that's something that many of us heard many times before on some of the management courses or on some of the basic teamwork classes, that by smart, what I mean is that your project is probably going to benefit from being specific. Have you identified the problems, and is your solution is actually going to solve it or address? Is it measurable? A lot of the donor funds go into what I would call feel-good projects that are good in essence, but can we actually measure the success and measure the impact of what they do? Is it achievable as well, sort of that we can demonstrate the results and impact of our work? And finally, relevant and time-bound in terms of how we address the issue, and ultimately, any project cannot take forever. So once we go through each stage of this process, first, your initial idea and project may change completely from what you had initially, but also it helps not just to understand and tailor your particular idea, but also get funds. I mean, any donor, unlike you guys who are the specialists in your particular field, most of the people who work for the donor organizations are generalists. So they may work on some economic development in Ethiopia today, and tomorrow they will counter Russian propaganda somewhere in the Baltic States. So probably they don't know much about the context, they don't know much about the subject matter. But if you provide them with a clear structure, it's so much easier to understand what is happening and how you are providing the added value. So yeah, all nice. Great stuff. How to make sure that I don't just kind of BSing you all the time and taking your time. And giving you some of the more concrete examples of how can we get from the idea to the project through this smart diagram. So step one is what I had been doing for the last 2 years, is the audience analysis in the Eastern Europe, that basically we are going in the field and trying to understand, okay, who these people are, especially if you are dealing with some of the international Western donors. They don't know much about the context of the environment they are trying to help. So let's talk to the people, let's get some focus groups, in-depth interviews, surveys, and so forth, as well as doing some social media analysis to get this basic first step, to have the baseline from which we can first argue that whatever we suggest is measurable and relevant, but also that we provide a very specific evidence that your idea, product, or service going to help? And people appreciate that, especially now when the donors are in increased pressure to demonstrate how their work is impactful and that it's not duplicating the work of somebody else. Fine, you have this idea, and don't get me wrong, one of the things why I'm so emphasizing the audience analysis is that people didn't do this before that often. Let's say I have mainly worked on projects that link to fragile and conflict-affected states. So many of my colleagues are coming from the background of doing work in Tunisia, Afghanistan, Libya, and Syria. And you would be surprised that sometimes, let's say, given the example of Afghanistan, a lot of the projects before focusing on increasing the perception of security in the country was linked on setting up more police stations and more people in uniform, so kind of to have this visible appearance of the authority figures across the country. And then somebody had the bright idea, oh, let's ask the local people, do they feel secure with what we do? Turns out they actually felt less secure by seeing so many of the people in uniforms and people authority. So by developing the more population-centric approach and strategy, our audience analysis goes to three main stages of any project. The strategy design of the whole approach, how do we insert our idea, what is our action plan to get it from point A to point B and ensure the success, but also what are the specific projects and activities that help you to contribute to this big picture, because ultimately most of the donors don't care about a very small thing, but rather how this collection of small things deliver big results. And finally, the effective implementation of whatever idea that you may have. In my case, there is an example of the Baltic States independent media that I've been working on for the last 2 years. And we focused on three key stages of developing media ideas at the hyper-local level, going outside the capital, engaging with the people on the ground, as well as providing them with the mentorship and training and in the form of the accelerator that helps them with some of the very specific and tangible skills to engage with their audience, both offline and digitally. So in this case, we don't really try to impose the will on the people, but rather foster this organic bottom-up growth. And I would argue that this is a much more effective and sustainable approach where once we leave, these guys, those who all learned all this knowledge and skills, will stay. Turns out that this model proved to be quite successful, and in Ukraine, the local media NGO sort of picked up this model after we had a bunch of really nice and insightful discussions and adopted this to the Ukrainian context. And the end result was that now there is a much more of the local and hyper-local media outlets who know how to report the news, cover the events, and also fact-check the information that they have in a much more effective and quality manner. So the impact that we had as a result of this just one project is going beyond doing some good or doing some good products, but the most important part was about collaboration and how we networked people from the media environment, with startups, with the local communities and general public. So again, one of the things that proved to be much more sustainable than any of the individual projects is about how people talk to each other. And that's what I appreciate, that there are so many people here that, well, do, I guess, most of the work not actually in this room, but during the coffee breaks, because that's where collaboration takes place. So in a nutshell, what I want to sum up my presentation is with there are some of the very basic and key ingredients for good collaboration that doesn't hurt, that wins more money, wins more friends, and ultimately wins more impact. And that's open communication with all the project stakeholders that you have around the table. It so helps to just be honest and open with people and be upfront of what you expect. The nuanced research and locally tailored solution help to refine your idea and make sure that it's relevant for your particular audience. And finally, by engaging this audience together, whatever you do is not being, kind of imposed from above, but rather provides a more organic growth on whatever area you may be working in. And for the media outlets, that's quite crucial, because that's how you win trust of the people who consume the news of your media outlet or NGO, but also they would feel much more invested in the quality news and the good media. So I'm looking forward to making good collaboration with all of you during one of the coffee breaks, and thank you very much for your time. Thanks.